So welcome back everybody to BeamNG.drive, and yeah, today we are doing a rear end impact crash test video. Slightly like the small overlap test video, but we're on the highway today because yeah, we can't like ram the cars in reverse into that wall that we hit in the last time we did a crash test video. So we're going to be using this crash test cart, which has a solid block of concrete up front, which makes it all fair and even for every car that we hit, and also means that we don't have any soft bodywork to lessen the impact that this is going to hit any of the vehicles that are waiting at the end of the highway that we're going to hit from behind. And yeah, we're going to hit them at 70 miles an hour just to make it fair as well. And yeah, we're starting off with the Pigeon, and then we'll work our way up through several various vehicles in size and weight. Oh well, the fuel's gone, and the chassis itself has been completely bent. These are all in park, by the way, just to stop them from rolling all the way to the end of the highway. And yeah, with the chassis bent, sparks have been thrown from it impacting the ground, and therefore the fuel has ignited. So yeah, even if you could survive the impact itself, either from behind or with that wall there, yeah, you're gonna be struggle to get out with all the smoke and the fire. Though I think the fuel tank itself has either disintegrated so much that the fuel has spilled out completely, or there just wasn't all that much in there with it being a Pigeon. But yeah, nonetheless, that's not very good. You'd have whiplash, your chest would hit the steering wheel, and yeah, even the gearbox has risen up because the transmission tunnel has risen up with the chassis. So yeah, not a survivable crash in the slightest. Not many crashes in the Pigeon really are, to be honest. So yeah, let's get in another vehicle. I think we're getting the Autobello, wherever it is. Yeah, there we go. The Piccolina, whatever you call it. Just getting any version. They're all pretty much the same in terms of crashability. Right. So they should do a little bit better because there is obviously more bodywork and it is a bigger car. Oops, didn't quite slow it down enough there, but that's a devastating crash. We've lost a wheel at least, so it's not going to slow down as much as a Pigeon there, because yeah, we've lost some braking capability there. Oh, the other wheel's gone, so we've got even less braking capability now, i.e. none at all in terms of the rear, because that is the only braking that we have with the handbrake, obviously. And yeah, that is pretty devastating for anyone in the back, I'd say. It's unlikely to survive anything in there. But in terms of the front, if you've got your seatbelt on and yeah, the seats are in good condition to take the forces, then you'll be alright, I think, to be honest. But yeah, it's all about the G-forces when it comes to these kind of crashes. It's not just about, you know, what the car looks like. It's the forces that are transmitted to whoever's inside that is a real issue with crashes. So yeah, right, let's get into... I think we'll get into a covert, wherever that may be. I change what mods I have on these games a lot of the time, so they're not always in the same place that they were before. So yeah, Covert is again a bigger car than the Autobello on the Pigeon, but again the rear passengers would be unlikely to survive that. That is quite a devastating impact in terms of the rear compartment there. I think we've actually got the car stuck to the concrete slab there. Yes, we did. Oh dear. But that just shows that even with a normal car with bodywork and the like, that would be a likely scenario in its own regard. So yeah, that is a pretty bad crash in a lot of ways. Just as bad for the rear as the Autobello, but passengers and the driver up front will be alright. But yeah, still a fairly devastating crash, and just shows that if you don't have much in the way of bodywork up front, then yeah, you're not going to bodywork in the rear even, you're not going to likely survive. To drive home that point, let's see what a car like the Miramar can do, which is again still an old car, but as you can see it has much more in the rear in terms of bodywork, so this should do better. But the big problem with these older cars is the fuel tank is really rather exposed in the rear, so whether or not that is going to come into play we'll have to see. Yeah, there goes the fuel tank. The entire rear has caved in. The roof has gone upwards, which shows that, yeah, the bodywork really isn't all that great, and yeah, there's a fire. Yeah. Again, the car gets stuck to the crash cart there. But yeah, the fire there is going to be the big killer, even though the rear looks a lot better than the previous two because of the amount of bodywork in the rear. It's, yeah, still not a looking like a survivable crash in the slightest. Even more so when you consider the fire. So yeah, bigger, older car there. Again, still not great, unfortunately. Crash car there is just going round and round in circles because one of the wheels is broken. Right, let's see what a bigger, newer car can do. Let's see what a Legrand can do. Obviously, it's not massively new. It's not like a post-2000s car, but it is around, you know, the 80s, early 90s. So it should do hopefully better than the Miramar. I don't think the fuel tank is as exposed in the Legrand as it was in the Miramar, so it shouldn't burst into flames. Though that is a problem with plenty of older cars, like I've said already, particularly the American kind. Oh. Yeah, that looks a lot more survivable, to be honest. Yeah, the rear looks a lot better. I know the rear door has caved in to the point where it's now open and it wouldn't shut, but on the whole, yeah, that looks a lot better. I know it's not got the best light in here, so let's drive it forward a little bit. Yeah, it looks a lot better. There is some seat deformation, but on the whole that looks pretty solid, alright. I know we didn't hit it 100% in the rear, as you can see, because this side is a lot better off than that side. But either way, you'd be better off in this than the previous three vehicles by a long, long way, especially if you're up front. So yeah, Legrand is a far better vehicle, and it's the best one so far. But I imagine, yeah, some other vehicles are going to be a lot better. Let's see what a classic muscle car can do in the Blue Book. We'll give the 4-door version a go. That is most likely going to be the more common version of this car. again, the fuel tank has been ruptured. And the roof is deformed, though not quite as much as the Miramar. And we are stuck. Oh no. Guess I'll restart that. Just let that drive off away. We're struggling to start. Oh dear, there we go. Again, yeah. Like the Legrand, the rear end has survived pretty well. But unlike the Legrand, this has burst into flames really rather spectacularly. So yeah, even though the rear end has survived a lot better, especially even in terms of the crumple zone of the rear, it's, yeah, not done particularly well in terms of the fire again. So what we need is a car that has plenty of rear end capabilities and plenty of space between the rear end and whoever's in the car, minus the fire. So yeah, let's see if the Roth Alpha can do well. This is obviously a car that has an estate version, that with estate versions obviously have a lot of rear end capacity, so therefore also a lot of rear end bodywork. So this should hopefully be a satisfactory car in terms of providing the safety that we need. Yeah, that's better. A lot better. I know the roof is deformed, which isn't a good thing, as it shows a lot of weaknesses in the car, but it does mean that at least it's not being transferred into whoever's in the vehicle itself. I'd much rather have the roof deformed than, you know, a fuel tank rupture or anything like that. Though again, we are stuck to the crash cart, which is not helpful. But yeah, it's definitely survived a lot better than the previous vehicles, though in terms of actual drivability, yeah, those rear wheels have been resolutely caved in to the point where, yeah, the car's not really going to be driving anymore. It's definitely a write-off. All of these vehicles have definitely been a write-off, but yeah, this is easily the best vehicle we've had so far. That rear end took all of the damage, as well as the roof taking a lot of the energy out of the crash itself, and yeah, I'd be confident of surviving in that. Though again, with all of these cars, the likelihood of a lot of whiplash and maybe spinal injuries, neck injuries, is always really rather highly likely, so you have to take that into mind. Right, let's get something a little bit more modern. Sunburst is tempting, but I feel that would be rather predictable. I don't want to go with another estate, really, to be honest. Let's go with a Cherrier. Let's go with the... yeah, we'll go with the hatchback. See what a modern hatchback can do in comparison to the Covet. Because, yeah, this has all of the crash safety features that you could ask for. And as we've seen in that small overlap crash test, it survived incredibly well. So it should hopefully do well here as well. Oh, maybe not. Jesus. I really wasn't expecting those wheels to pop like that, and I certainly wasn't expecting the fuel tank to go. Though whether it ruptures, we'll have to see. Well, not just ruptures, obviously it has already ruptured, but whether or not it burns, we'll have to see. Yeah, that is way more devastating than I was expecting it to be. Don't think I've actually ever had the fuel tank on one of these go. So yeah, that is surprising. The car itself still moves, which is no surprise when you consider this is obviously a front wheel drive car. But yeah, the rear end definitely took a lot of that punishment, but as you can see, the rear seats are fine, despite the fact that the car has been lifted up like a you know, one of those classic muscle cars that are on hydraulics. It's, yeah, far better off than any of the other vehicles so far, despite the cataclysmic damage. And yeah, even the fuel tank didn't go up, which, yeah, probably is down to the fact that it did rise up rather than, you know, like the Pigeon, which squished downwards. Sorry, that car is annoying me. Unlike the Pigeon, which went downwards with the chassis, which then generated sparks on the floor, this went up, which I think helped save the fuel tank from igniting. Because obviously the less sparks, the less likelihood of it going up in flames. So yeah, mightily surprised by how much damage this actually took, but also surprised that the amount of damage it took didn't result in a worse crash. So yeah, Cherry pulling in a big one there. So let's see what another vehicle can do. Let's see what a coupe can do. Now, these don't have the most amount of bodywork in the rear end, but obviously they are quite a modern car, so who knows what this will do. This crash kart is really effective in terms of doing these kind of crashes on a more consistent basis. There is a version with a pole on it to do with those pole side impact crash tests, which I might do in another episode at some point. Tell me if you'd like to see that. And yeah, this is done really well. There's no real surprise. I don't think there's any rear seats in this, but yeah, you'd be likely to survive that, to be honest. Even with doing something stupid like that. But yeah, don't think there are any rear seats in this, no. So yeah, you'd be fine in that, because not only are there no rear seats to worry about, but yeah, you've got a decent amount of bodywork between the rear and the passenger and driver. So yeah, that is kind of predictable, but predictable in a good way, because that's kind of what you want in a car, it to be predictable when it crashes. You do not want a crash to be unpredictable in a car like that. Right, let's see what something a bit larger can do. Let's see what a hopper can do. We're not taking any SUVs out yet on this episode, so let's see what a hopper can do. Now, with the overlap test, the hopper was quite dramatic in the way it crashed. I'm pretty sure we did it in that episode, but I have done it in my own time if we haven't. And yeah, the bodywork basically separated from the chassis itself, which is not a good thing. So let's see if we get anything quite as bad as that. We shouldn't do. I'm pretty sure the bodywork is attached well enough to survive such a rear end impact. Yeah, the fuel tank has ruptured, so that is not good, but the bodywork has not come away from the chassis this time around. Though the roof has peeled away, but that is no surprise. It's only made out of fabric, it's not a metal roof outside of the struts, so yeah, no surprise in that regard. We have attached to the cart, unfortunately. But still drivable, even though we've lost a rear tyre. And yeah, on the whole that is pretty decent, but again, with the rear passengers I'd be surprised if they survived, or at least were able to walk away, because yeah, unlike some cars that we've taken out, this doesn't have much in the way of bodywork in the rear, so therefore your head would be able to fling back, and especially if it's a tall vehicle that hits you in the rear, that would hurt quite a lot. So yeah, not great, but far from the worst that we've had, and despite the fuel tank going, it didn't go into flames, so yeah, that's always a positive. It's always a positive when you have a crash and it doesn't burst into flames, so yeah, happy with that. Let's see what the Roma can do. Obviously this is a far larger SUV, but it should survive, I hope. but again, I'm not particularly sure where the fuel tank is on this. Ah, it's there, so fuel tank should be alright. Still not sure why the textures haven't come in on the hubs there, but I'm sure that will be updated at some point. But yeah, for whatever reason, they're not loading for me at the moment. Alright, so obviously this Roma is the heaviest vehicle that we've had on this episode so far. It's also the largest that we've had on this episode so far, so in all honesty, it should do really rather well. Yep. Barely any damage at all, really. Spare wheels come loose, which I guess is no real surprise. Obviously damaged the bodywork a fair bit, but even the crash cart has taken a fair old wallop there. As you can see, we've not had it react like that so far, so yeah. Damage, certainly. Probably a write-off, because there is a lot of damage there, like I said, but on the whole, yeah, that's barely moved. In fact, there's probably more damage on the front after the crash cart just landed on top of us than the rest of the car, so yeah, on the whole, that is really satisfactory. It's basically got all the advantages of the estate, with the advantage of obviously having a higher ride height and more weight, so yeah, really pleased with how the Roma performed there. So let's see what... Ooh, I don't know. Oh, I wish the crash cart would shut up. Let's see what a people carrier can do, because obviously this is the kind of car that most people would be driving. So let's see what it can do. Now this does have the advantage over your average people carrier, because it does have a slightly higher ride height. So it's going to be interesting to see if that makes a difference. Might actually look at one of the more normal variants that are lower to see if there's a massive difference between the two, because as we saw with the Roma, the high ride height and the fact it weighed a fair bit did help in its survivability there. So let's see if this is any good. Oh dear. Well, a fair old bit of flexing there. And yeah, I'd be surprised if anyone in the rear would survive, because these seats are literally only a few inches away from the boot lid, but anyone else forward of them would be alright, I think. Especially everyone in the front. But yeah, that's taken a lot of damage. The roof, the doors, spare wheel, the boot lid have all been severely damaged, so yeah, I wish we had a more modern minivan on this game, to be honest, because it will be interesting to see what they can do. Now let's see what a lower version can do. Obviously that's a high riding version of the minivan, so let's see what a more ordinary version can do, and see if there's any difference. Now I think the lower versions, the less off-road orientated versions, are going to be lighter, but it's more probably about the ride height that's going to concern me, because as we have seen in a previous video that I think I did a while ago, higher riding cars generally are better in terms of crash safety than lower riding cars. But to be honest, I think this looks pretty much the same. Popped into the reverse there. But yeah, this looks pretty much the same, to be honest, though the rear seats are now flopping out like that, so there might be a bit more in the way of damage, but again, it's all circumstantial in these kind of crash tests, because it all depends on the weight of the vehicle and the high ride height as well. So yeah, I think Fifth Gear did a test where they crashed two identical cars and one was lower than the other, and the one that was lower than the other suffered worse. So yeah, on the whole I think this would be the worst vehicle to be in than the higher riding version. but on the whole they look fairly similar, so I wouldn't really worry about that, to be honest. But it is interesting to at least find out something about that. Right, final vehicle, I think we'll go for the ETK 800 series. So this is basically a more modern version of the ROF Alpha. So yeah, let's see what a modern day estate can do. I did that by accident. Did not mean to press spawn new. Obviously I meant to press replace current. Right, let's see what this can do. Now this is far heavier than the ROF Alpha. Obviously it's far newer. So yeah, newer and heavier should prove to be advantageous. But you never know with these crashes. We have had some surprises so far today. Let's see if there's any more in store for this final crash test. Well, the bodywork has survived reasonably well. Obviously we've lost the rear quarter windows and the boot lid and the rear window. But yeah, that looks reasonably good. Somehow the radiator is leaking on this. Even though it had a rear end. Oh dear. That is not good. Well, we don't need you anymore to crash, really. So yeah, for some reason the radiator is leaking, and ignore the side damage because that was from the crash cart bouncing off. But yeah, on the whole that looks pretty good. There's obviously some concern that with this having a short rear end that the passengers here would get some impact from the roof coming down. But on the whole, yeah, that's looking like the safest car that we've had on this episode overall. So yeah, no real surprise, it is a more modern car, and yeah, at the end of the day it still moves. Not very good, it's moving around to the side and all that lot, but yeah, on the whole that is really rather good. And yeah, probably the one I'd go for if I had to be crashed into the rear end by a 70-mile-an-hour crash cart. So yeah, there we go. Nonetheless, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.